Hello and welcome to the M.B.M podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. M.B.M is a proud part of the Wander Barn podcast network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at M.B.M, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hey friends, I just wanted to pop in and talk a little bit about M.B.M Behind the Scenes. When I entered the yoga world as a teacher, I was surprised by how many yoga teachers were struggling with the business side of yoga. And that's why I created M.B.M. M.B.M helps yoga teachers and studio owners become entrepreneurs. It helps you to go from surviving to thriving with your yoga business. I am on a mission to change the yoga industry, to teach yoga teachers and studio owners about the business of yoga, and to help you feel more confident, successful, and abundant. After releasing hundreds of podcast episodes, I want to create content that dives deeper into helping yoga entrepreneurs thrive and elevate their businesses. This is where M.B.M Behind the Scenes comes in. Each week, you will get bonus content from the weekly guest or myself, diving deeper into how you can take the teachings and apply them to your business. This podcast is designed for yoga teachers and studio owners who are ready to take it to the next level. If you enjoy M.B.M and have been looking for an affordable way to learn more, this is it. For the cost of 2 lattes per month, you will get never-before-heard content that you can't access anywhere else that will give you tangible ways to dive deeper into your yoga business. If this sounds like something you're interested in, let's dive in. Head on over to patreon.com/MBM yoga and sign up to get behind the scenes now. Once again, that's patreon.com/MBOM yoga to get all the exclusive behind the scenes content. I'll see you there. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the M.B.M podcast. I am very grateful and excited that you are joining me for today's episode of the show. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by OfferingTree. OfferingTree is an all-in-one, easy-to-use online business platform that I've been working with for years. If you're looking to save time, energy, and money, check out OfferingTree. Don't forget to grab your special discount at offeringtree.com/MBM. And now, today on the podcast, I am very excited to be joined by Laura Burkhart. Laura is an E-RYT 500 international yoga teacher, a retreat leader, and a yoga teacher trainer who offers 300-hour teacher trainings, as well as a mentor for yoga teachers who want to create successful public and online teaching careers. In this episode, Laura talks about her career as a yoga teacher and how she pivoted from teaching at yoga studios to teaching independently to teaching retreats, yoga festivals, and trainings to doing all of her work online. Pandemic or no pandemic, it's always important to be growing, shifting, and pivoting your business as you grow. And this is really what Laura shares in this episode. She talks about all the pivots that she did prior to this last year and how she was actually teaching online prior to the pandemic. And she shares everything that she's learned through her experience and her career. So there's a lot of goodness in this episode. I hope that you get a lot out of it. And without further ado, here is Laura. Welcome to the podcast today, Laura. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation. There's so much to dive into. And I'm curious if we can just start with where you're joining me from today.
Yeah, well, right now we are in New Smyrna Beach, Florida. That's where I'm currently. I tend to hop around between here and San Francisco and Kentucky, 3 very different locations. It's almost like going to 3 different countries.
Yeah. I've been to San Francisco and Florida, and I've just driven through Kentucky. So I feel like I have a good sense for how different those different places are. And I'm glad that you're in a warm place at the moment. That sounds lovely.
Yes, it's very nice.
Amazing. And so before we get into all the goodness that you've got going on in your career, the pivots and stuff that you've made over the last year, I'd love to hear a little bit about your yoga story and how you got into yoga.
Sure. Well, I grew up dancing, and that was like dancing and theater. That was career path number 1. And then I went to school, and my main focus was that. And then I decided to be practical. And when I was in school, I was like, I'll be practical and I'll like get a degree in communications and whatever else. But during that time, it's like I missed dancing and I missed movement. And I tend to have been more of like an overachieving, like almost push really, really hard to make good grades and do things really well, no matter what it was. To the point that my body was starting to have issues from like adrenal issues and stomach issues and colon issues. And I just had issues, insomnia. And so I went to a yoga class, and this was like in Lexington, Kentucky. I went to Lexington, and that's actually, I started doing more yoga then. One, because I just wanted to help with my stress. And I really liked it because it felt like this movement meditation that I remembered when I used that I felt when I used to dance. But it was more of a process of encouraging you to respect your body rather than push your body beyond its limits, which I really liked. And I really enjoyed the breath work, things like that as well. And I just took a lot of that back into my own work environment. And anytime things that were really stressful came along, I would breathe. And I would remember, like, you can handle the same stressful situation without without reacting to it in a more negative way, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
yes. So it really helped with that and helped with insomnia and helped with different things. So I mean, I did take some classes before that, but back then it was like me in a dark room with people over 80. And I was like 16, and it just, I was like, wow, this is yoga. We're just going to lay here. So later on, I discovered there are other ways, there are other formats and other yoga classes that were more appealing to me at that young age.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And it's what was doing yoga like with a bunch of people who are much older than
Oh my
you when you were
gosh.
like in your teens?
Oh my gosh, I just knew I needed it back then because I was just dealing with a lot of stress, and at the same time, just stress on multiple levels, both at at school and home, and different things that were going on, and just also my own pressure even back then of doing really well. And so I was attracted to yoga even then at 16. And the only yoga class that was in town was me and like I went there, it was me and like three other people who were older. I mean, I'm saying 80, but they're probably in their 60s and above. And we just laid there in a dark room. And I was like, wow, this is not quite what I expected. But I was really into health and wellness back then. So even in my high school. So when I was in high school. So yeah, it wasn't quite what I thought of for yoga. And then I tried other classes a little bit later on, but it wasn't until almost like my senior year of college that I really started getting into yoga. That's when I started going more consistently. And I just found a different studio, a different class that resonated with me much more than the one that I took when I was in high school.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it's really inspiring to hear. And I'm curious, when did you decide to become a yoga teacher?
Well, I went from that experience in college. My fifth internship was at Jiva Mukti in New York, and I went there for an internship in public relations and marketing, which turned into a job. And I would type for like 10 hours a day in this broom closet that was turned into an office. And then I would go to the yoga classes, and I was like, wow. I think I'd really like what they're doing much more than what I'm doing back here, typing 10 hours a day. And so I think part of it was just, I love the whole movement meditation concept, and I liked how it changed my life. And I felt that at that time, it would be more fruitful to help people in that way rather than me typing for 10 hours a day. I just resonated with it more. And so I didn't immediately become a yoga teacher. I went to San Francisco after that, and I was doing a very similar job and started working with Jason Crandall and very similar marketing and PR type work. And then over time, I started getting my certifications Yeah, but I just wanted to help people find that same relief of stress, and really encouraging people to take care of their bodies and listen to their bodies and find a way of relieving stress besides alcohol or drugs or whatever else. So that's and I feel like a lot of people who have gravitated towards some of my classes are people who work hard and at least at one point in their life partied hard, and they're just trying to find a better way of managing life and stress because maybe their body can't handle that way of relieving stress at this point in their life.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. There's a lot of parallels in you and I's story coming to yoga. Like I came from a dance background too, and then, working in a stressful job, yoga was this like hour in the day where I got to just like be silent and be on my mat. And I really felt this like kind of longing to help other people with that too, because it helped me so much. It'd been such an integral part of my journey. And I think that's the case for a lot of yoga teachers. Like, I think maybe more and more as it becomes more of like a defined career path, maybe people are like, I want to be a yoga teacher. But I think so many of us are like doing something else. And then we practice yoga, we experience this like really powerful personal shift. And that inspires us to want to share that with other people who are similar to us, other people who are working stressful jobs, or like you said, have these vices that we use as stress relief, like, alcohol, maybe it's drugs, maybe it's online shopping, something like that. And yoga can kind of be this other outlet that's maybe a little bit more holistic, a little bit more healthy, allows us to tune in a little bit more instead of looking for this outward stuff. So I really love hearing that.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I feel like a lot of people, they do resonate with that, and I, when talking to yoga teachers, there generally is a why or a shift. Like, why did you come to yoga? And it's usually that same why is what makes them want to also become a yoga teachers, because they're trying to bridge that gap for someone else, be it finding a healthier way of dealing with stress, or it could be trying to fulfill maybe some spiritual need in their own life, or it could be maybe they're finding acceptance in their own body and they want to help someone else do the same thing. So I feel like most people come to yoga for a certain reason. It's not just because they want to become more flexible. And it's the same thing. I feel that's the same reason why a lot of people want to become yoga teachers, is because they enjoyed the experience of how yoga impacted their life, and they want to give that to someone else and help someone else.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And so diving into your career a little bit, did you start out by teaching at yoga studios primarily?
I did. I started teaching. I used to work for a place called the San Francisco Bay Club, and that's where I was doing more marketing and programming, and so I was there, and that's where I actually started teaching yoga as well. And I continued there, and I became the yoga director for a while, and I was teaching there. And then from that point, then I started teaching at other studios like Yoga Works and Yoga Tree in San Francisco. So that's where I began my teaching career.
Very cool. And then how did your career kind of shift throughout the years?
Yeah, my career started to shift. I started to really see that, well, one, I started teaching online probably about 8 years ago. And I really enjoyed it. I was started teaching with different online companies. And so I enjoyed that. I was still teaching my, gosh, not even 10, probably 15 classes or so a week. But I was shifting and I was teaching online as well. And then I was also doing more humanitarian retreats and just feeling out other things besides just teaching in a classroom. And so yeah, that just started to shift from the online teaching and then starting to teach more at festivals and writing for publications. All of that started happening later. And then over time, I realized I didn't want to teach as many public classes as I was teaching. So I kept making more and more shifts toward teaching less public classes and teaching more be it online or workshops or festivals or what have you. So I was starting to make that shift from teaching less public classes to teaching more in other ways and other avenues.
Yeah, I love hearing that. And I think that, a lot of teachers that I have talked to and that I know of who have been teaching for, 10, 15, 20 years have kind of, a lot of them have made this shift over time. And I think what's really interesting about the last year is that a lot of teachers were kind of forced into that shift really quickly. Right. I'm curious if you have any, tips or insights for people who have shifted from teaching in studios to teaching more independently, just based on what you learned over the years.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason why I made that shift too, I remember, gosh, it was like probably 4.5 years ago. It was actually after I had an injury that started actually almost exactly 5 years ago. And about 6 months into it, after coming back from leading a retreat, there was something inside of me was like, something has to change. I have to make a change. Like I just knew internally that a shift had to make in my own life. And I knew I had to get out of teaching so many public classes. It wasn't even just for my hip. It was almost like there was almost like this internal clock saying like, it's time to move on to the next, like jump onto the next lily pad. So there was that shift that I was already feeling before people had to make a shift this past year. So that was just more of an internal push that was happening inside of me. And I think right now, as you're saying, this past year, a lot of people have had to shift to teaching online. And one of the things too, I think with making a shift, be it teaching online public classes or trainings or workshops, is in making that shift, especially even a year ago and even now, it's just forgiving of yourself, like not being so critical. And I think at first everyone wants things to be perfect and the lighting to be perfect, and the microphones to be perfect and everything to be perfect. And sometimes you just have to go out there and do it. And it's kind of like flying a plane and building it at the same time. And over time, you're like, oh, okay, if I change the angle to look this way, it's going to be better. If I use these lights, it's going to be better. I'm going to upgrade my mic to this, but not having to make it all perfect at once. And I know for myself, I made the mistake years ago of spending a lot of money making really high quality videos on my own rather than going through a company. I spent a lot of money and I still have those videos, and I haven't seen a lot of the money that I invested come back. So I think right now the wiser thing to do is for people to take what they have, use that, and then slowly upgrade and see if it's something you even like, as far as like the Zoom classes, as far as leading trainings, both, maybe you're leading a training online or you're leading workshops online. It's like, is this something I like? And how much money and time do I want to invest in on this? Because I feel like as we start to shift out of this pandemic and people get more vaccinated, then there are going to be some people who really liked what was created this past year online. And they're like, yeah, I love it. This is my jam. And some people, they'll be like, nope, I actually want to go back to in person. And I think it's the same thing from students. Some students are like, yeah, this was really convenient for me. And other people are going to be like, no, I want to go back to in person. So I think it's just being authentic to who you are and what it is that you actually like, and not doing something just because it's a trend or it's popular, but really resonating with what it is that you're doing, because that's what's going to shine, and people are going to feel that. If you're not connecting with it, then they're going to feel that. And if you are really connected with it, then they're going to feel that too. So I think one is being patient with yourself, trying things out, experimenting with things, not being afraid to quote unquote fail, and and seeing if it's something that you actually resonate with.
Yeah, I think that those are really, really great tips. And I do think it's really going to be interesting kind of over the next, I don't know, 3 to 6 months, maybe up until the next year, like into 2022, to kind of see how people shift as we exit this pandemic. And, are people going to want to stay online? Are people going to want to be in person? And I think there's going to be a split of what people like. And it's kind of interesting. Like I work with a couple of studios, and we've kind of seen, like, as we've had to go through these different closures and lockdowns and stuff in the place in Canada where the studio is, it's, some people just really like practicing online. And some people are like, I can't practice online. Like as soon as I can get into the studio, the better. And I think the same is happening for teachers. I think there's some teachers that are just doing it because that's the way that they can reach their students with their services right now. And there's others that are like, I'm never going back. Like this has been one of the best shifts I've ever made. So I think it's really just kind of interesting to kind of see what's going to happen and kind of how the yoga space is going to be after this is all said and done.
Right, right. And one of the things I would recommend, even with that, is if people do continue to do online videos or Zoom or what have you. I do know that with videos that, and they might have already figured this out themselves, is that if the videos are shorter, like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 35 minutes, nothing over 45 minutes, if it's something that's already recorded, that tends to be more popular than having a recorded class that's 60 minutes or 90 minutes. So for the general population, the shorter the class is, more people tend to gravitate toward that. And that's just me also talking to a lot of different online companies who that's what they do for a living. It's the shorter classes that tend to do better. But if it's a live online class, then going up to 60 minutes, for me, 60 minutes has been like my sweet spot. And I'm just kind of stuck at 60-minute for live classes, just because I feel like people, they don't want to look at a computer very long. They don't want to have that. But because it's live, it can be longer than 30 minutes or 35 minutes. But because they're still looking at a computer, I find that there's a cap. They don't really, people don't want to like stare at the computer for 75 minutes or for 90 minutes with this type of device. And I'm even kind of what you were saying, I'm even feeling out things myself, because I did one teacher training in person during the pandemic, and it was all spread out. It was a limited number of people. And then the next training I did, half of the people were in person and the other half of the people Zoomed in. So that was a really interesting experiment, having half Zoomers and half in person. And then I was about to put out an online teacher training. I'm still thinking about it. But even right now, to be honest with you, I'm trying to like put my ear to the earth and see what the pandemic is going to hold. Because if more people are getting vaccinated, I don't know how many people are really going to want an online teacher training come this fall or next year. I think some will because of the convenience, but I also feel like a large group of people are going to be like, get me out of my house. I want to go see some humans. I want to travel. So I'm even at this point right now, how much time and money do I personally want to put into investing into an online training when who knows, as you were saying, what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. I definitely have one in-person training that I know I'm going to do later on the year, but it's the online one that I'm still filling out personally for myself. And I'm just trying to keep my ear to the earth, feel a pulse on things before putting a lot of time and money into something, because I want it to be good. Because I've done that before where I put a lot of time and money into something and things shifted. And so it's just, instead of just grabbing and going, I'm trying to be really like wise with my steps without having so much fear. You also need to put yourself out there as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's definitely something to kind of consider. And I feel like it's really hard to predict. It's like really hard to know like what's going to go on and that type of thing. And it is interesting because like, I feel like as you're talking about, teacher training, I think about the pros of an online teacher training being that, all of a sudden people don't have to travel to come and take your training. They can join you from literally anywhere around the world. and to be able to do that, which is really, really cool. But then I also totally hear you on like, are people going to want to travel? Like almost want an excuse to travel because it's, been so long for so many people and they're ready to get out of their house. And I saw a really interesting meme just like kind of going around on Instagram. I think it was maybe a month or so ago. And it was like, oh, I suddenly understand the roaring 20s because it was like after the 1918 flu pandemic. And, the 1920s were like this time where everyone got dressed up, everyone was going out a lot. And I'm like, hi, I feel like I'm like understanding this just a little bit for the first time in my life, because it's like, that wouldn't have meant anything to me like 3 years ago.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to know and it's hard to plan, which makes it like hard as a business owner.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's definitely that, because I have that same feeling that once things start to slowly open up, it's like once the floodgates start to open, I feel like it's going to be like a whole new like summer of love. People are going to be just like girls and boys gone wild. People like I'm free out of my cage. I just want to be with people. So I definitely feel like kind of like with the roaring 20s, where people will probably want to get dressed up, go out and see people. Yeah, so it is finding that balance between that, which is most likely going to happen, and also, as you were saying, the convenience factor of like, oh yeah, doing a training at home online sounds great. I know for myself, even if I offer training online for myself, I feel better when there's still quite a bit of the online content for it to be live. I want to do more. I do still quite a bit of content live Zoom because I want to see people's bodies. It's just how I am. I'm like, if you're going to pay to train with me, I want it like, I need to see you. I need to see your face. I need to see what's going on in your body so I can have like a really good personal connection with you and really personally help you. And that's just me. That's very important to me. So I know that it would still require not just here are some recordings, but it's still requiring also live Zoom where I can actually see you. And, even and if I was going to do one that's just online, I also want to have some one-on-one sessions with people too, because I want them to get the most out of the training they possibly can because we're not in person.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely like a lot of things to kind of figure out and whatnot. I'm curious also, I know that, retreats and festivals were a big part of your business outside of just running yoga teacher training programs. What has that kind of looked like for you, or how has that shifted over the last year?
Actually, last year at this time, it was really funny. Not haha, but but I actually was flying to a festival. And as I was flying to the festival, it got canceled. It was right around this time. Literally, they canceled the festival the day before the festival happened. So you have all these people who are coming in for it. And it's like, psych. It was just because the state shut everything down. It wasn't like intentional on their part. And I've seen that a lot for a while, because no one knew how long this pandemic was going to last, where festivals were going to be happening this past year. And it's like, nope, not yet. Nope, not yet. So I think there's a lot of festivals that are being put on hold. But I do feel like when they do open up again, I feel like they're going to do very well. And same thing with retreats. I know of some people who are leading retreats they have during the pandemic, especially toward the latter half, like these past so many months. And they've been sold out. And I know I don't feel comfortable with it at the moment, but I feel like a lot of people, again, they're like, get me out of here. I need something else. I got to have something else besides the same four walls I've been looking at. And even a retreat company that I've worked with for for 8 years, I looked at their schedule and they're pretty booked. Like they're just waiting for things to open up. So I know for 2021 and 2022, they've got a lot planned. And I think they're just expecting a lot of people wanting to travel. So for myself, I'm still putting feelers even on that. I'll probably do something local first as far as a retreat goes. But I know even for myself, I'm like, I am ready to get my passport ready and just, also see the world. And I miss travel teaching. I miss traveling to different places and teaching just around the United States and around like Europe and places like that. I miss doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting to think about retreats. And one of the things I've kind of thought about with them is like, I feel like obviously people want to get out of their houses and be around like-minded people and, have these experiences. But I do think about how a retreat for a lot of people might actually feel like a really kind of like good jumping off point in terms of like feeling safe because you've got a bit more like control over your environment, right? Like you're going to one place for the whole time, whether it's in your own backyard or a couple hours away, or, maybe we're starting back with international stuff with retreats and whatnot, but you get to be with the same group the whole time and you get to focus on like your health and well-being. Like you get to do yoga every day, get some sunshine, probably, eat good food, have somebody kind of like care for you. And, to me, that seems like, I mean, I'm totally comfortable with travel because I travel pretty much like full time. But if I wasn't, like, that seems like a really good jumping off point. And so I'm not surprised that people would be excited and ready to get back to that world.
Oh, absolutely. And just as you were saying, it's such a controlled environment and it's the same people. Whereas if you're traveling by yourself or you're traveling, with one other person, you're traveling all around, you don't really know what's open, what's closed, who you're coming in contact with. Whereas on a retreat, it's most likely the same group of people, but you're going someplace else. And you're right, it is more health and wellness. So it does seem like a good place to start as far as like traveling and venturing out.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey everyone, we're just taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about OfferingTree. I wanted to remind you about the special discount you can get with OfferingTree. I love telling yoga teachers about OfferingTree because not only is it your one-stop shop for all things that you need in your yoga business, but it is also easy to use, it's affordable, and it's truly an amazing company to work with. OfferingTree lets you sell courses, run classes, manage memberships, and so much more with just one account. That's right, just one login for all those parts of your business. One of the best parts about OfferingTree is their online store. You can sell digital content like yoga videos, challenges, and courses right from your website. If you're teaching yoga classes and looking to level up, selling digital content is the next step to growing your business. Over the last year, we've seen so much pivot and change happen in the yoga industry, and having your own unique yoga business where you offer your students different course material can be so beneficial in creating a sustainable business with diversified income. And while there's many different platforms that you can create courses on these days, OfferingTree's course tools are easy to use and they're really affordable. And if you have a website you already like, you can still use OfferingTree. But there's one other thing I want to tell you about OfferingTree that makes all the difference in the world to me and probably to you too. They're a company that truly cares about yoga teachers and the wellness industry overall. I chose to partner with OfferingTree because I love the product and I love the people. Whenever yoga teachers have a suggestion for something that they need out of the platform, they can reach out directly to the people at OfferingTree and they're actually heard. So much of the development that OfferingTree has gone through over the last year has been because of yoga teachers like yourself. So if you're looking to save time, energy, and money in your yoga business, OfferingTree is hands down the software for you. Go to offeringtree.com/M.B.O.M to learn more and get your discount. Okay, let's get back to the episode. And so do you have anything, I know we kind of talked about your sort of like up in the air plans for yoga teacher training programs. Do you have anything planned for your own retreats or festivals at this moment? Or is it kind of like still a bit of a waiting game?
For trainings, I definitely have got one. What's in the back of my mind? I've got a few actually lined up in the back of my mind. It's just the online portion and whether or not I'm going to do one of my in-person trainings, have it open to where it's like people zooming in as well, like I did this past one. So there's that. With the festivals, I don't have any predictions on that one just yet. I have a feeling that'll be 2022. Looking at doing more festivals and things like that. And same thing with retreats. I might end up doing a retreat this fall that would be more local. And then getting, again, people warmed up with that. I think that's a good warm up. And I believe by this fall, actually, I even feel like by the end of this, but definitely by summer, I feel like anyone who wants a vaccination, they can get it. So I feel by this fall, we'll be in a safer period to offer something. And I feel people are going to be even more comfortable going further than a local retreat in 2022.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I feel like when it comes to hearing festivals, I unfortunately think 2022 in my mind as well, but nice to at least have like a year in the horizon. Like I'm hopeful that those types of events will come back, which is great.
Yes. And that's exactly how I feel. And it's just, I think by that point in time, one, you have to, like, as a festival, I'm not a festival owner, but you have to promote it, obviously. And two, I think more people are going to be more comfortable with it once more people get vaccinated, or if there's enough people who are vaccinated that they feel safe, and just being safe being around a very large group of people, because that's a lot of exposure. I mean, that's a lot of people you're coming in contact with, and when you go to a festival. So I believe by 2022 that will be more of a safer time period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Festivals are kind of like the other extreme from retreats where like you can have an intimate controlled group, a controlled time, controlled environment. It's like festivals are almost impossible to have any sort of control in that way around. You often have, people in for one day or just one session or the whole time. And, with festivals too, I'm sure they pay a ton of money to have the space and get the teachers and get DJs and have events and food and all that type of thing. Like you want people to be able to come, obviously, for it to actually be something that's worth the time and effort as the organizer.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. And even for people, I think some festivals are like, oh, we'll have everything spaced out and this and that. But I think one of the reasons why they didn't do that is for safety, one. And two, it's like with some of the studios, I guess depends on which state you're in. For the studios that are open, some of the ones I know, they do have them people spaced out, and they're just waiting, for people to get vaccinated so they can have more people in their studios. I know for like in San Francisco, haven't been out there. I will be out there next week, but being in San Francisco, I think they might just be starting to open up their studios again, but still be very spaced out. In Kentucky, they're open, but it's very spaced out. And so it's, having to pay that much rent or that much lease for a limited amount of people can be really difficult. And then Florida's got its own thing going on, as far as just has its own thing going on. So I can see for a lot of these studio owners, and it's the same thing with festivals, if you're limited to how many people who can be there, I mean, sometimes it's a cost, it's a value, the cost of the venues, the cost of your lease versus how many people can come in, and is this feasible? Does it make sense right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I work with two studios. One is in Northern Virginia and the other one's in Western Canada. And, both are doing like a hybrid of all classes are live streamed, and then they can both have, people in the studio, but spaced out. And it's just, I think that you have to be doing a hybrid at this point or have a really good like online thing going on for it to be actually sustainable, because like, I think both studios are able to have, six or eight people in the studio when you could normally fit like 20 to 30 people in the studio without spacing. And it's just when you think about the loss of revenue on that and the fact that your rent hasn't changed, the pay that you're paying your teachers has hopefully not changed, it's just a big hit. And so not having people to come online is just, it makes it really hard. And, there are people who aren't comfortable being in person, and this gives like more accessibility to more people at this point. So I feel like the hybrid model has been working really well in my experience. And obviously it's a very different experience for everyone involved, the teacher, the students in the studio, obviously the students practicing online. But I have felt like really grateful to work in an industry where we have been able to pivot in such a big way, because there's a lot of, especially in the wellness industry, there's a lot of practitioners that can't pivot in that way, like ones that do more of that hands-on work, like massage therapists and whatnot.
Very true. Very true. And I totally agree with you. I feel like right now having that hybrid it's the way to go at this point in time for studios. And I think in the future, as more and more people get vaccinated, more comfortable, then you'll see a lot more people coming back into the studio. And I feel like it's the same thing for teachers too. There are some teachers I know who work with studios and they're doing their classes through studios. And then there are other teachers I know who are doing things more independently. And, it's weighing out those things too. I feel like, and I could be wrong because I haven't talked to every single teacher out there, but I feel like at first for many teachers, working independently was great. And it might still be fantastic for quite a few teachers. And for other teachers, working with a studio and having that connection with the studio is really good. It's stable. And once things open up, I'm sure a lot of the studios are going to be like, yeah, we're going to have these teachers on the schedule first, the ones that have kind of stuck through us through the pandemic. I could definitely see, I've talked to some studio owners that seems to be more the pattern of, it's having that security of working with a studio is also nice too. So I think for teachers, it's just weighing what seems to be the best option for them as a teacher, whether that is working independently or working with a studio, having that stability. And also just, again, going back to being authentic and figuring out, like, authentically, do I like teaching online? What does my audience like? Like the people I work with, were they once students of mine who were in a studio? Do they want to go back to that studio? And just really feeling out all of these things and just being authentic to the way that you like to teach, and going with that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think too, I've seen a lot of teachers who have created their own independent businesses and they're really thriving in that way. And I think that that's really amazing. I think that it's also probably been like pretty eye-opening for a lot of teachers as to like how much business, like marketing acumen, finance stuff, accounting, organizational pieces that come into play for actually running your own business. And this is the aspect that studios, for the most part, have taken off the plate of yoga teachers. If you're a yoga teacher that's primarily teaching at yoga studios and you've got, a couple of good gigs going, then you don't really have to worry about filling your classes. The studio kind of does that for you. And it becomes a lot harder when you have to take all of that on, because you don't just get to focus on your teaching, then you have to actually focus on your business as well.
Exactly. And I think as a teacher, it's an individual preference too. It's so for some teachers I know, they're like, I would much prefer teaching for a studio. I much prefer my privates coming from a studio. I like the security of that because I don't have to worry. I don't have to think about the financial part. I don't have to exchange money. I don't have to market as much. I show up and I do my show, and then that's it. And then other teachers, they have felt like it's better for them to do it more independently. And, and maybe in the future, maybe it's a hybrid of both. Maybe it's a hybrid of, if a studio allows for that, a hybrid of, I'm going to teach at the studio, maybe so many classes a week, I'm going to do this independently also. So yeah, it'll just be interesting to see how things shift in these coming months, and how things shift with both as students showing up to classes, as students coming to classes, be it online or be it in person, and as teachers to see how things shift in that way. If they stick, for some teachers, if they stick to being online, be like, this is my jam, or seeing them going back and teaching in studios again.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It definitely is going to be interesting. And I'm curious, I know you've run your online business for so long. Can you share some of your top business lessons that you've learned throughout your career?
Yeah. Well, one thing I think that people need to know if they start just working for themselves is, it was just as you're saying, it's like you are the business, you're the show. And I know for myself, it's a lot of times I feel like I check in and I don't check out. Like, as far as like, I clock in and you're like, okay, when am I going to clock out? And I do tend to work a lot. It's a lot of work. A lot of people who I know who do well independently in the yoga world, they are some of our borderline workaholics. It's a lot of work to do it, but at the same time, it can be fruitful as well. So I think knowing how much for yourself, how much responsibility you want to put on yourself, or how much responsibility would you prefer to give to someone else, like a studio or a retreat business, and have them take care of that. So I think it's learning that. And then also when you're doing things yourself, like I've also had a humanitarian retreat business that I tried a lot of different things. I think it's being okay to try things. And if it doesn't work out, great. Well, you tried that, it didn't work out. Go try something else. So I think it's not being afraid to step out, not being afraid to try new things, not being afraid to ask for what it is that you want. And even if there's something that you really want to do, it's like, okay, it's being really clear with your vision about what it is you want and what it is you want to create, where it is you want to go, being clear about the steps as to how to get there, and just really just doing it and going for it and not being afraid to ask. But if you ask for something, if you're wanting to do something, be it teach on an online platform or work for a publication or teach at a festival or shifting and doing all these things, you're the one who's going to be knocking on the door 9 times out of 10. They're not going to be knocking on your door. You're knocking on their door, and it's being prepared for what it is that you're asking for and what it is that you want. So just being clear about that within yourself and being clear about what it is you want to create. And just really, going for it and going after it. And just being prepared and, and always do your best, but at the same time, also giving yourself grace and knowing that it's a lot of times, especially this past year, it's definitely felt like flying a plane as you're building it at the same time. And that's fine. And it's being okay with that. So, so that would be definitely my advice, is definitely have a vision, be very clear, and be prepared for what it is that you want. And don't be afraid to ask for what it is that you want.
Amazing. I love all of those tips. Those are really great lessons for everyone listening to kind of tune into, especially if they've been feeling like they've been rocked hard over the last year, maybe feeling like, when is this going to end? I'm ready to make another shift and all that good stuff. So thank you, Laura, for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can share where people can go to find you and follow along and all that good stuff.
Yeah. And also what you're saying, listening to that shift, definitely listen to that shift inside of you. If something inside of you telling you to shift, definitely listen to that. Mm-hmm. It might just be time to jump from one lily pad to the next, be it teaching more online or teaching more retreats or whatever it might be. Definitely. Or
teaching less, maybe. Sometimes that's a really hard shift.
And that's a really hard shift. And another big lesson, I'm just kind of throwing this in there too, is listening to your body and not pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, not demonstrating everything. I know I'm kind of like a walking, I feel like billboard for that. I mean, I know I've pushed so hard that I've had surgery in one hip. I'm dealing with I've dealt with shoulder injuries, and I'm now working on my other hip. And it's just really listening and taking care of your body. And I was definitely a teacher that actually walked around the room a lot of the time. I wasn't demonstrating a lot, but the amount that I was teaching was starting to wreak havoc on my body. So it's also not just listening to what it is you want to create, but also really listening to your body so you can, quote unquote, be in the game for a long time and not get knocked out.
100%. I really love that. So thank you for sharing that. I know I have a number of yoga teacher friends who teach full time. And this is something that they're often, sharing about, is like, as yoga teachers, we do have to be really aware of the amount of physical and mental stress we're putting on our own bodies in order to give to our students. And I always think about how we can't pour from an empty cup. We always have to make sure our cup is full, which is so hard as people who love to give.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, I would love to stay connected, and people, they can find me on my website at lauraburkhartyoga.com. So I would love to connect. And I've got a lot of free classes on there. I also have my live Zoom classes, the schedule for that, and their upcoming teacher trainings. And funsy things like that. And so if people want to know more about how to avoid injuries, I've got some articles about that. So definitely stop on by.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Laura. This has been really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I so appreciate you having me. I appreciate it, Amanda.
All right. I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Laura Burkhart. Laura and I continued to chat behind the scenes all about her top tips for creating videos. So in this interview, she talked about how she's been teaching online for a really long time. She took her business online years before the pandemic or anything like that happened. And she's pretty well versed in how to create both recorded videos as well as an experience for live stream videos. And so in this episode, Laura and I dive into everything that you need to know about creating videos and all of her top tips. And she drops some really, really good information. So that's over at patreon.com/M.B.M yoga if you'd like to check that out. As well, a huge thank you to our sponsor, OfferingTree. To start spending more time with students and less time with software, head on over to OfferingTree.com/M.B.M to get an exclusive discount. And of course, thank you to you for listening to the show. I'm so appreciative of your time and for you listening to the podcast. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.